Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you for joining our webinar today on decoding your career pathway to the federal government. My name is Peter Kamochai. I'm a manager with the Partnership for Public Service. Before we jump into the presentation, I wanted to tell you a little more about our organization, the Partnership for Public Service. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization with the mission of making government more effective for the American people. We try to do this in a variety of different ways. We advocate for legislation that will improve the civil service. We train federal employees in crucial leadership skills, and we strive to inspire the next generation of federal leaders to serve. And that's why we're very excited to be joining you here today to talk a little more about federal careers. And we also administer internship and fellowship programs directly to students to place them into federal agencies. And we'll talk about that a little bit later today. So at the partnership, we believe that we all deserve a government that is responsive to the needs of the people it serves. A lot of people debate whether government should be bigger, government should be smaller. We at the partnership, what makes us unique is that we are focusing on making government better. So you can sum it all up this way. We focus on talent. We're helping government attract and keep mission critical talent. We focus on leadership. We're developing strong leaders, equipping and empowering them with the skill set and the mindset to improve government from the inside. And we focus on reform. We're reimagining and rebuilding some of the systems and processes like technology that underpin the work of government. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Leia, to get started with our presentation.
Thanks, Peter. So as Peter mentioned, my name is Leia Washington. I'm an associate manager on the federal workforce team here at the partnership. And I'm also joined by Amiko, who's going to co-present. So I'll let Amiko introduce herself now.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Amiko Matsumoto. I serve as a senior executive coach and facilitator at the partnership. I do have a background in higher ed, so it's fun to see these different universities and colleges coming through. I've had a chance to work with or partner with several of them over the course of my career. So it's nice to have you all here.
Thank you, Amiko. So today we are going to have our presentation on all about federal jobs and federal hiring. So you can see our agenda here. First, we'll give a brief overview of the federal government, just do some level setting so that everybody is on the same page about what we're talking about today. Next, we'll talk about the benefits of working in federal government, and we'll discuss why you should consider a career in government by highlighting some of the benefits. Then we'll talk about the nitty gritty on how to actually get into the federal government. So we'll talk about some internships or fellowship programs that you can use as an entry point for government. And then we'll talk about the main way, which is applying through USA Jobs. And then finally, we'll finish it off with some resources that you can use and take with you after this presentation to help get you started on searching for federal careers. And then finally, we have time at the end for some Q&A. We encourage you to be thinking of questions throughout, but we'll save most of the questions till the end. So to begin, we'll talk about just an overview of what the federal government looks like. So public service careers and careers in government can mean many different things, from working on the Hill to a good government nonprofit organization like the partnership. But when we talk about federal government in this presentation, we'll mostly be referring to executive branch agencies. So this can look a little bit elementary, but we just wanted to show you this slide to show you we'll mainly be focusing on president, vice president, and cabinet for executive branch agencies. That being said, all three branches do work together to provide very important services to the American people, and none are completely independent of one another. So we'll likely mention all three throughout this presentation. So next we want to talk about what it's like to work in the federal government. And usually the easiest way to talk about this is by dispelling some common myths about what people think. So people have a lot of preconceived notions about what it's like to work in government. Some are based in truth, but others we just want to talk about why they may not be the most true and why you might find federal government may be more beneficial than you think. So the first that we often hear is that government is not innovative. A lot of students might consider careers in the private sector because they feel like government is just slow moving and kind of behind the times. The truth is innovation is happening all throughout government. So we actually are announcing our Service to America Medals finalists for 2021. So each year, the Partnership for Public Service honors people in government who are doing exceptional work and who are really paving the way. We'll talk about two specific Sammy's finalists in a couple of slides, but I did just want to mention a couple of ones that we've highlighted in the past here as well. So one is one that's near and dear to my heart, which is Griffin Rogers. He was a 2015 SAMHSA finalist, and he developed the first effective drug treatment for sickle cell disease, which affects 100,000 Americans worldwide, or 100,000 Americans and millions worldwide. So he oversaw a stem cell transplant clinical trial that reversed the illness in a majority of patients. So this is just one example of an innovation in medicine where government really paved the way. And in speaking with Griffin Rogers, he said that had he not worked for a federal agency, specifically NIH, he wouldn't have had the money, the resources, the time to really build this out the way that he wanted to. Another really relevant example is the Department of State. They host what's called the Virtual Student Federal Service Program, which facilitates the expansion of virtual internships throughout government. They recognize that traditional internships are not feasible for all students. So this program is actually a few years old and now operates at 55 agencies, offering over 600 internships yearly. And this was before COVID. So the State Department was really paving the way for virtual internships so that when people moved to remote work, they already had an infrastructure for virtual interns. So this was an innovation that happened before it was needed. There's plenty of other examples, but we just wanted to say that there's innovation happening through all throughout government. The next myth is that you have to live in Washington, D.C. to work for the federal government. So many students tell us that they don't want to work for the federal government because they don't want to live in the D.C. area, which is totally acceptable. The majority of federal positions, about 85%, are actually located outside of the D.C. area. So while it's true that the largest concentration of federal employees in one single area is in D.C., the majority of positions are located outside of the area. The next thing that we hear is that federal government is just not a great employer. People think kind of along with the innovation piece that it's a little bit slow moving and that government, they might find a better employer in the private sector. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of the federal government in the next section and why they are a great employer. But we just wanted to highlight here the best places to work rankings. So the Partnership for Public Service every year puts out the best places to work in federal government rankings that are based off of the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. And 89% of respondents say that the work they do is important government-wide. So there's many agencies like NASA and others, NASA is just highlighted every year, who actually have higher employee engagement scores than the private sector. So they find their work really fulfilling and are really engaged with their work. Next thing that we hear is that the federal government is inherently political. So this is a big one. A lot of people think that working for a federal agency, they are subject to kind of the whims of whoever is in the presidency at the time, and that they don't want to work in politics. And so while there is some truth to this, civil service is definitely affected by politics. Civil service itself is not inherently political. There's a revolving door of political appointees at the highest level, but the majority of the civil service is nonpartisan and focused on priorities that kind of don't change from administration to administration. Skills mission match is something that we'll talk about in this presentation. A lot of people in federal agencies feel that they are aligned with the mission of their agency, and that's why they choose to work there. And the mission doesn't change from administration to administration. And then finally, we hear often that people think that they have to work in public administration or political science, that type of field in order to work for the government. That's obviously not true. We're speaking to many technologists today, and there's plenty of opportunities in government for you, which we'll talk about. So here's a quick glance of the federal government. We just wanted to give you an overview of the jobs that exist in the executive branch. So the federal government is the largest employer in the country, so there's no shortage of opportunities within it. There's more than 400 agencies and subcomponents across the country, with over 2.1 million federal employees staffing them. So subcomponents don't necessarily mean that they're small. There's plenty of examples of large subcomponents. For example, CDC and NIH are subcomponents of the Department of Health and Human Services. So there's over 400 of these subcomponents. Some of them are very large, some of them are very small. The point of this slide is just to show you, again, that there's so many opportunities within federal government that you may not have thought of before this presentation. And then again, just wanted to remind you that 85% of the federal workforce is based outside of the DC area. So we can see in the chat all of the schools and areas that you're coming from, which is really exciting to see. So there's likely federal positions where you are already located. Perfect. So what could a career in government look like for you? So this slide really just highlights kind of the different opportunities that are available within a specific agency. So this is a very generic slide, not necessarily a specific agency, but as you can see, the federal government is hiring in all fields. Each agency has many different functions. They need specialists to carry out their missions, but they also need support functions for their operations. So you can see on the left-hand side some of the support functions. These functions create an internal process at an agency to get things done. But they also need people to carry out their mission. So NASA will need scientists and engineers, NIH will need medical doctors, Department of Justice will need lawyers, etc. And just kind of a specific example so you can see how this plays out. The Department of Veterans Affairs, their mission is to promote the health and well-being of veterans very broadly. So they'll need doctors and nurses and hospital staff to carry out their mission of providing that healthcare to veterans. But they also need employees who carry out support functions. So like any other business, they need those who are in budgeting or finance or human capital, technology, legislative affairs, and more. So there's plenty of opportunities within any given agency. So to focus on technology specifically, we've put together these two slides that will highlight some positions in engineering or IT in the government. So on the left-hand side, you can see the top agencies that are hiring employees in engineering specifically. So the Department of Defense is a big one, but there's also others like NASA, Transportation, Agriculture, and Interior that are also hiring those in engineering. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the top fields of engineering in which they're hiring. So general engineering is the most common, followed by electronics engineering, technical, mechanical, civil, and aerospace engineering. So this is just to give you a sampling of the different opportunities in government. The next slide is very similar, except for IT and computer science. So we'll talk a little bit later when we talk about USA Jobs, how to specifically search for these positions. But you can see here all of the different agencies that are hiring in IT or computer science in the government. Department of Defense, again, Treasury, Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, and Social Security Administration. And then finally, on the right-hand side is just a brief overview of a sample position in government. So this is actually a real job. I just went on USA Jobs, found a quick sample position that was actually hiring. So you can see the Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Prisons might not be the first thing you think of when you think of an agency that needs technologists. But they need an IT specialist who will oversee the implementation of new system hardware and software. So just a really good example of a job that's open right now for technologists in government. And now I will pass it over to Amiko for some more benefits of working in the federal government.
Thanks, Leia. A couple things we just want to highlight here. We often get some questions of like, hey, what's it like to work in the federal government? What sorts of perks or benefits might there be? So I wanted to just have a chance to cover a few of those with you today. One is just this concept of impact. Oftentimes we have folks who really are just mission driven, want to make a difference, and there's really no greater opportunity in many respects to do so and work on just at a large scale than in the federal government. If I were to ask each of you to describe your morning, chances are you had something to eat. You may have driven someplace, to get to location. Some of you are in school as a result of grants, Pell Grants. There's things like, you had food to eat and you were confident or they'd be safe to eat, right? And that you may have watched TV and had a system that was set up in place there, or you went on a road that was built and you felt like it was going to be safe. Like all of these things have an impact or kind of related to the way in which the federal government works. Some of you are interested in particular issues like hunger or homelessness. If you think about the scale of the federal government as a funder on those issues, there's just a tremendous way to make an impact. Leah mentioned that there's a concentrated effort of federal employees in the Mid-Atlantic area, but there are jobs kind of all over the world, and the federal government functions in about I think there's job opportunities in about 160 countries. So there's just a tremendous way to make a difference and be a part of a tremendous mission. Some of the benefits that you see here, kind of from a work-life balance perspective, or maybe now in the age of COVID especially, it's more of like work-life integration. But there's a lot of flexibility within the federal government, even before COVID, but certainly now, things like telecommuting options or flex schedules. There's just a lot of different ways in which people can set up their work week or their work days in particular. We think about the potential for kind of loan repayment or loan assistance. There are a few programs that may be of interest to you in that way. Some agencies will have potential student loan repayment assistance as part of the hiring process and kind of the things that can be negotiated. Not many of them, but some of them do. And then there's some programs like the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program that may also be of interest to you. One of the things that we get questions about a lot in particular is around health and retirement benefits. As an employer, the government really is an employer of choice in this regard. Tremendous health and retirement benefits that are available to employees. And then you've got things like mission alignment, the valuable work experience piece, the kind of training and development that happens. I, as my current role, am doing a lot right now in training and development for federal employees. A lot of different ways in which agencies support their workforce to make sure they have the skills necessary to do their job and are really supported and equipped to do their best work. So those are a few of the many perks and benefits that are out there as a federal employee. I saw a question in the chat about which departments have student loan forgiveness options. It really varies, and it may not be an entire agency as a whole that offers that, but as a specific type of, as for a specific position. So if it is something that you're interested, we'll get into the job opportunity announcements later and how to read through USA Jobs. There's kind of ways to look for that there. And there's also information likely on agency websites if it's something that they offer. It's not, unfortunately, which makes it difficult to find. It's not like every person in this category or every agency would offer it. It really kind of becomes on a case-by-case basis, but it is an option for at least a few agencies and a few types of positions. So Leah, if we can move on to the just kind of the meaning of meaningful work. I did mention that the partnership or the government is very mission driven. A lot of times people go to work for the government because they believe in the opportunities to make a difference. We wanted to highlight just a few folks here for you to kind of make that a little bit more real. Sometimes it seems like very kind of abstract, like it's possible, but not quite really understanding what types of things are available. So I wanted to highlight two employees for you here. You have Donna Dodson. She is NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Chief Cybersecurity Advisor. She was instrumental in the development of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is the seminal guide used by thousands of public and private organizations around the world to help make decisions on how to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber attacks from criminal hackers and foreign governments. The framework not only helps organizations understand their cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities, but also helps to mitigate the risks with customized measures. The framework really offers guidance on organizations to respond to and recover from cybersecurity incidents. And besides the federal government, many companies have embraced this framework, including JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, Boeing, Intel, the Bank of England, just several others that are out there. And then Dr. Beth Ripley from the Department of Veteran Affairs. She's the National Director for VA on 3D Printing Network and the 2020 Science and Environmental Service to America Medals finalist. She's developed an interconnected hospital-based 3D printing network that was designed to share resources and knowledge throughout the Veterans Health Administration. This network has grown from 3 to over 30 hospitals and has benefited more than 1,000 veterans, reduced surgical times by over an hour on average, and prevented unnecessary surgeries and more. Most recently and relevant, this network of VA hospitals has begun to design and produce PPE and ventilators to aid in the coronavirus response. So here are just a couple of federal employees and ways in which they are tying their skills and interest to make a big difference to the mission of their respective agencies. You can learn more about them and others. I think Peter put it in the chat, the Service to America Medals website, where we highlight a lot of the different ways in which federal employees are making tremendous difference through their work. So Lee, with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Amiko. So for this next section, we're going to talk about different ways you can get into the federal government. So now if you're feeling sufficiently inspired to pursue a career in government, here are some tangible ways to go about doing so. So first, we're going to talk about internships and fellowships. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the Pathways program, but we'll start here because this is kind of the main government internship program. So in 2010, former President Barack Obama signed the Hiring Reform Initiative. This basically took all of the different government internship programs and put them under this umbrella of Pathways. And so we'll talk about it on the next slide. So Pathways is essentially 3 programs combined together. There's the internship program, the recent graduates program, and the presidential management fellows or PMF program, all under this umbrella of Pathways. So we'll talk about each of these individually, talk about how they're similar and how they're different from one another. So the first one is the Pathways internship program. So this internship program is designed to provide students enrolled in a wide variety of educational institutions from high school all the way to graduate level with opportunities to work in agencies and explore federal careers while they're still in school and while getting paid for the work that they perform. So the internship program is kind of what you think of as your typical internship experience. It's for a limited appointment. It's while you're still enrolled in school, and it's just an opportunity to work in a federal agency. The benefit of pursuing a Pathways internship program rather than just applying through a third party or just kind of one-off internships in government is that Pathways positions are paid and they are also eligible for conversion. So this is a government term that really just means that once you finish your internship, if you meet particular requirements, the agency can hire you on full time. This may not seem like a lot, but it's actually really important. Conversion is really helpful if you decide that the government is the right career path for you. Agencies have more flexibility just to hire you on, versus if you come through a third party or a position that's not eligible for conversion, you'll have to apply with the general public like everybody else, wait for them to post a position, and it may not work out in your favor. So conversion is a really great benefit of the Pathways internship program. This is different than student volunteer programs. You might see both advertised because student volunteer positions are unpaid. So Pathways internships are paid. The next program of Pathways is the recent grads program. So like the title suggests, this program is for recent graduates of undergraduate or graduate degrees. So the recent graduate program, again, is similar to an internship in that it's usually for a limited appointment, but they afford developmental opportunities in the federal government that are intended to promote possible careers in the civil service and to really build up your leadership skills. So participants in this program go to an orientation. They receive that 40 hours of training and development. They complete an IDP, which is an individual development plan that just maps out how they want to grow in their position. And they're also assigned a mentor who will help them through this program. Again, people who complete the recent grads program are eligible for conversion. So if you have a recent grads position and you really enjoy the agency that you're at, they can hire you on full time, as long as you successfully complete the training and development components of the program and work the set number of hours that you need to work at the agency. And then the final thing that we'll mention on this program is that you have to apply within 2 years of receiving your degree. So if you graduate, you are eligible for this program for up to 2 years. If you're a veteran who's completing a tour of duty, you have up until 6 years after your education to apply for this program. And then the final program that we'll talk about is the Presidential Management Fellows program. So this is the final Pathways program, and this is, again, a leadership development program for advanced degree candidates. So different than the recent graduates program, you must be graduating with an advanced degree, master's, PhD, JD, etc., to be eligible for this program. This is government's most prestigious fellowship program. It has existed in various forms for a while now. They receive a lot of applications and only a few finalists. How this program works is that it's run centrally from the Office of Personnel Management, but there's opportunities all across government. So for this program, you apply for the program, and then if you're selected as a finalist, a whole host of opportunities that exist in government will be open only to you and other PMF finalists. You'll still have to apply to those individual opportunities, but you'll get a whole hosts of jobs that only PMFs can apply to. So you have a significant leg up with those positions. Applications are only open for 2 weeks in the fall. Typically, they run from late September to early October. I think last year it was open the very end of September and then the first week of October. You can apply during your final year of your graduate studies, and then you can apply for up to 2 years after. So similar to the recent graduates program. Once you're selected and you have a position at an agency, this looks a little bit similar to the recent grads program. It really is a leadership development program. So again, you go to orientation, receive training and development, are assigned a mentor, and then have the opportunity for a rotational assignment. And this program lasts for 2 years. So now we're just going to quickly go through some other opportunities for internships and fellowships. So the Pathways program, again, are all paid and are all eligible for conversion, all run centrally through government, but there's plenty of other internship and fellowship programs that are run by third-party organizations or that you can find and apply for on your own. There's so many, probably an unlimited number. We're just going to cover a few that we think would be particularly relevant for you all. So the first is the Cybersecurity Talent Initiative. So this is a program for recent graduates in cybersecurity to gain cross-sector work opportunities. So for this program, you apply once you're a recent graduate, and you will have an opportunity to work for a federal agency for 2 years. And then once you complete your time in a federal agency, you'll be invited to apply for a position with one of the program's corporate partners for 2 years. So it really is a public-private opportunity. While they're in the federal government, fellows receive robust leadership development training and mentoring opportunities, as well as an opportunity for student loan assistance. So once you're in the private sector, in addition to the salary, they will repay up to $75,000 of student loans. Again, this program is open to those who have recently completed a cybersecurity related degree program. And usually the time limit to apply is within your final academic year. So if you're graduating academic year 2021, 2022, you would be eligible for the next cycle beginning in 2022. The next program we'll talk about is the Congressional Innovation Fellowship. So this is a program that aims to bridge the divide between Congress and the tech sector by placing tech-savvy candidates to work with members of Congress and congressional committees. So this opportunity is for early to mid-career technology professionals. Typically, they take advanced degree candidates or candidates who have about 5 years of work experience or post-grad study. You are placed in an office of a member of Congress or a congressional committee for 1 year, during which you will receive a competitive stipend and benefits. So this is a really great program for just general technologists who are looking to work on the Hill. Next, we have the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program. So this program is for advanced degree candidates. So if you're graduating soon with an advanced degree, this program might be for you. It's only open to candidates with a doctoral level science degree or a master's in engineering. This is similar to the Congressional Innovation Fellowship in that it's a year-long appointment, but this one is more broad. You can be in the executive branch, legislative branch, or judicial branch of the federal government. But again, it's really designed to help bridge that gap between the public sector and science and technology policy. And then the final program that we'll talk about is the Civic Digital Fellowship. So this is, instead of kind of a year-long fellowship, this is your traditional summer opportunity. So fellows in this program will spend 10 weeks gaining a deeper understanding of technology that helps run government programs. This program is open to students specifically who are studying software engineering, data science, students who are looking to be product managers and designers. And so this program is run by a group called Coding It Forward. And it's a really great opportunity, again, to just kind of get that experience while you're still in school. So this is open to people who are currently enrolled in undergraduate or graduate degree programs. So we just mentioned a lot of different programs, but we just wanted to mention where you can go to find other opportunities, other ways to begin your career in federal government. So agency websites and social media are a really great first step. A lot of agencies will have their own career page like careers.state.gov or intelligencecareers.gov. to highlight all the opportunities that exist within a specific agency. So if you know that you want to work for the State Department specifically, you can go on their career page to see different internships, fellowships that they host. You can also explore local and virtual federal hiring events, such as hiring fairs. Many agencies will try to participate in these just to make you aware of opportunities that exist in their agency. Government internship programs through your university or third-party entities. So for example, the Partnership for Public Service, we run the Cybersecurity Talent Initiative that we mentioned. Coding It Forward runs the Civic Digital Fellowship. There's plenty of third-party organizations that run government internship programs. Government service programs such as Peace Corps and AmeriCorps are also really great opportunities. We'll talk about this in a later slide, but participating in these programs can give you a leg up in the federal hiring process. You might have special hiring eligibility when you return. And then finally, gogovernment.org is a resource that we'll touch upon at the end. But this is a website that can kind of help you begin your search. So we have different career guides that map out, okay, I'm a student in technology, what opportunities exist for me in government? Who's hiring students in technology, etc. So a really great resource as well. And now I will pass it over to Amiko to talk about the actual application process for federal opportunities.
Thanks, Leah. One of the challenges that we often hear is that sometimes it's hard to understand how to search for, how to find and apply for federal positions. So wanted to spend some time with you today to kind of explain USA Jobs, help you kind of decode some of the way the job opportunity announcements are, and help you kind of figure out how to navigate that process. So we're going to cover in this section how to search, search for positions, create a federal resume, how to kind of go about some of the other aspects of the hiring process, and kind of appropriate ways to follow up with the agency. So first, with regard to searching USA Jobs. This is primarily the portal that agencies are required to use to post positions. It's gotten much better over the years, but you'll notice that it is a bit of a challenge. You have some opportunities, kind of like Google, to put in keywords and kind of do a word search that way. But there are a lot of different kind of shortcuts that we're hoping to teach you today to help you navigate the site a little bit more easily. So this is kind of the screenshot. You're welcome, if some of you are on a computer and you want to open another window so you can follow along, you're welcome to do that. But you do have here, kind of what the kind of front page looks like. And then we're going to walk you through or kind of go through some of the different things here. A couple of things to note on just on this initial kind of site here. You have the top left has an opportunity to put in kind of keywords or series codes. And then you have an opportunity to put in a location. Depending on, if you're specifically looking for, like, I really want to work in Pittsburgh, you can kind of see what's happening there. If you're open, you can leave that blank and it'll call up all of the different positions that, affiliated with what you're asking for. Leah, we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide, and ways to kind of explore different opportunities. So on USA Jobs, you'll have an opportunity to kind of look at hiring paths, and you see this focused here. You may be interested in kind of jobs that are open to the public entirely. Some things you'll know you have an opportunity. Leah was just talking about students and recent graduates through the Pathways programs. There's ways for you to designate if you're looking for kind of specifically related opportunities there. Some of you may have other sorts of things that are part of kind of your individual situation. Perhaps you served in the military. You may be an individual with disability. There's kind of different ways to note that. And when you put those in, USA Jobs kind of looks at, kind of configures the different opportunities that you have available there. There's another, let's see if, another kind of thing I find helpful on USA Jobs in kind of the area where the search is, there's also a place to look up series codes. You see some of the things highlighted here around, ways to explore specific types of fields. You can also look at the series codes, and that's kind of a way in which the government kind of classifies different positions. So everything is kind of different types of jobs are associated with a certain code. So for example, HR positions are in a 200 series code. There's a way to look that up on USA Jobs so you can kind of narrow in what types of things are most interesting to you, what types of fields. You can put that in a keyword search as well. And it will call up any kind of positions that have that specific code to them. And sometimes that's an easier way to go about it than trying to come up with the right keywords. Or sometimes, for example, if some of you have been, if some of you are looking to work at the corporate, well, it was the Corporation for National Community Service, it's now AmeriCorps. If you put in working for AmeriCorps, it pulls up all of the positions that are in the AmeriCorps agency, but it also pulls up anything that refers to America Vista candidates. And so you may get a bigger field than you intend. So having something like the series codes is a different way to kind of narrow your search and more focus it on the things that you're interested in. So we encourage you to use these, the hiring path codes and other things to help identify what it is specifically that you're looking for. So you get the search results that are most tailored to your interests. Lee, if we can move to the next one. One of the things that people get a little confused about is we refer to as the general schedule or GS levels and grades. This is again a way in which the government kind of classifies positions, and it has these different GS scales. GS levels. We've highlighted most of them here that are probably most pertinent for you all. Where you are, you can see the different types of grades that correspond with different types of qualifying education. There was a couple questions I saw in the chat around kind of years of experience and do other things get taken into account. They often do. So you may have work experience. You may have gone to school for 10 years, been in the workforce 10 years prior to going to school as a bachelor's degree student. It may be that you can come in more than a GS 5 or 7, given the work experience that's provided. When we get into federal resumes in a little bit, it really does serve you in your best interest to highlight all of your experience in your federal resume. It helps make the case for the grade and step that you'll be working in or qualify for. So this GS scale gives you kind of the level that you're interested in. And the USA Jobs on that, I think it's the first kind of opening page, you can select which grades you're interested in as part of the ways to narrow down your search. And so if you put in, kind of an appropriate code here, GS7, 9, or 11, that will, again, kind of narrow the positions for the ones that you're specifically eligible for. Let me move on to pay and benefits. These often correspond with that, and the government has this kind of system that it uses where it'll say, here's kind of your the base pay, and then you have something called locality pay. So this chart kind of highlights the ways in which locality pay plays out. So you may have the same kind of a GS5 position, but if you're in New York, for example, you'll likely make a little bit more than you will in Atlanta, just given the cost of living being a little bit different there. So the locality pay tries to adjust for those differences in cost of living in certain areas. And you can see kind of here in general ways that that pay scale plays out. The other thing to highlight here is that there's oftentimes a lot of room for opportunity to advance in the federal government quickly. So you see in 2 to 3 years, if you come in as a 5 or a 7, you can advance through the steps and the grades, corresponding and responsibilities and other things to move from a GS 5 or 7, for example, to a GS 11 in a few years. So you see the progression there and how the pay scales are designed and the type of pay increase that you may get as a result of that. Again, this doesn't account for the specific benefits. So this chart is a little bit different. It's labeled as pay and benefits. This doesn't account for things like health insurance and other things that would then become part of your total compensation. But it does highlight the ways in which the pay piece works. We've covered here GS levels, but one thing to note is that there are steps affiliated with them. So as you progress or have more experience, you would have what's called a GS level, and then you would have steps affiliated with that. Again, as I get into the federal resume piece in a moment, it's just worth it to know, this is kind of the range of pay. As you're looking at some of the job announcements, you may see some reference to STEP as well. And that's just kind of like within, for example, the GS5 level, there are multiple steps that you can go through, kind of pay increases that align with that. Moving on to the decoding the announcements. Here, a couple of things to just highlight. This is, again, if you were to put in for a particular position. In this one, you see the opening and closing dates. So that's when the position is open for application. So you can see how much time you have to apply. It'll usually give you that ticking clock if it's something that's kind of counting down quickly. There's a thing to note there, but it also just gives you a sense like here's where here's how much time I have to apply. The GS scale and grade there is this case it's the GS 12 to 15. So this would be somebody that's more mid-career and above. Sometimes you see in the pay scale something like an NX code or an NY code. What that means is that that agency has what's called an alternative personnel system. And it means that instead of using the GS scale, they're using their own scale. So you may see some numbers that aren't GS. One of the things that's kind of just a way to find the equivalent is to look at the salary that's available and see how that corresponds to a GS scale. So it may say, for example, that it's an NY4, and NY4, the salary range would be between 90,000 and 140,000. So you'd see it would probably be the equivalent here of a GS 12 to 15. This is oftentimes the base pay. It does not include the locality pay, but you can see more specifics in that as we go. The service is competitive. If it was something that was only available to federal employees, for example, that would note that. So you just want to see something there where you would be able to apply as somebody that's not currently working for the federal government. The work schedule, it'll list if it's part-time, full-time, if there's flexibility there. And then you see on the far right that it is open to the public. And that, again, if it was something that was narrowly available, it would note it there. The job announcement number that you see on the bottom of this slide is something to keep track of. Each position has its own announcement number. And if it's something that in your materials you want to cite or you want to be able to track back to, it just makes it easier to have that readily available. So that is kind of a quick overview of the job announcements. Again, for those of you who have this open, you can kind of scroll down. There's a lot more information on there that you want to pay attention to. They'll have information in there about security clearances, for example, or what the process is going to be like. Are there other sorts of assessments you need to go through that can all be provided as part of the job opportunity announcement here? But hopefully this gives you just a quick overview of what that is. I want to move to federal resumes. There are some differences between what we refer to as a regular standard private sector type of resume and a federal resume. The federal resume gives you a lot more room to describe your skills and experience. And there's some additional information on here that helps the federal HR folks kind of assess your candidacy. Sometimes we get the question of like, if it says I can submit a regular resume, should I do that versus a federal resume? I always recommend that people use the federal resume format. It provides a lot more detail and it gives you a chance to make your case for your candidacy in a much different way. Oftentimes we think of regular standard resumes as a page or 2 pages. The federal resume, as an entry-level person, they can go up to 5 pages sometimes. So you have a lot more room to describe your experience. You can go onto USA Jobs and create an account to develop your resume. This is worth doing. It takes a lot of time initially, but it's worth spending the time to do this for a couple reasons. One, you have a way to provide, there's a different cell, so you can provide exactly the type of information that they're looking for and that they need. And then again, you have a lot more space to describe your experience. So sometimes with a regular resume, you're having to really kind of decide like what are a few bullets I really want to highlight. In a federal resume, you have a lot more space to add information. The other things that are in a federal resume will ask for things like how many hours a week you worked, your supervisor, where you were located. It kind of has specific fields that you'll fill in as you go. And you can create a master resume there that has everything. Especially for people who are starting off in their careers, I recommend that you do a master resume that has every possible thing you could think of that you've done. You can always cut and paste for other versions of your resume. Currently in USA Jobs, you can have up to 5 versions. So you may have different things that you want to highlight if you're looking for an analyst position. For example, a budget analyst position versus a program analyst position. But you want to do your federal resume, fill in all of those places, all the spaces, and take the time to get it down there. When I've done my federal resume, it takes a long time. So it's easier not to try to do that all in one sitting. Give yourself time to do it. Have it ready to go so that when there's a position open, you're just having to make a few tweaks to that rather than try to create it all at once, especially if you're looking at a short turnaround time as far as when a position closes. So again, this is a lot more information, but it's great for you as a candidate because you can really highlight a lot more of your work experience and make the case for why you should come in a higher step and grade. And they'll take into account all of those different types of experiences as we go forward. Let's see. Looked like there was a hand raised. I know we're trying to get through to answer the questions there, but if there's something specific to that, I'm happy to take a moment and answer. I don't see it in the chat. All right, I will try to get to it at the end. So that is kind of about the federal resumes. Couple of tips that we would suggest to do that. Again, tailor your resume. A lot of times government positions go through a computer screen first. And so they're looking for keywords. One of the things that we encourage, if they're asking you for a gray sweater, tell them you have a gray sweater. Don't tell them you have a charcoal cardigan. It is not points for style in how you write, but you really want to make sure that they can find what they're looking for. And so if they're asking for specific things, you want to make sure that your resume is using the same keywords. And so it's more easily found. You do have a lot more opportunity to expand on your experience. So take the time to do that. Use metrics where possible, be as specific as possible. Again, in the federal resume, you have a lot more space to do that, and you're not having to make the same choices as you would if you were trying to cut this down to 1 or 2 pages. The resume builder, and I think there's some more information in the chat around what our website, gogovernment.org, has around federal resumes. Your account on USA Jobs, when you create that, you'll have access to the federal resume builder. It's really worth making the time to use that process. Moving on, Leah, if you can advance the slide. There is kind of around the application process, you'll go ahead and when you note this is this type of grade and scale, you're eligible for this. You're going to go ahead and apply. You're going to click this apply button. You may be provided or sent to a different kind of back end system. So if you apply for multiple jobs, you're kind of like confused that USA Jobs thing's all the same, but this agency has a really different format or look and what they're asking for than another agency. It's because they can have separate backends. And they kind of, each agency can have its own specific process. So you want to just be mindful of that as you go through, and not surprised if you're seeing something as you apply to NSA that may be different than if you're applying to HHS, for example. So there are just going to be some varieties there. And this one, you'll note, again, the announcement number. You want to make sure that that's still there. You've read through the duties to make sure that that's aligned. And then it'll kind of take you through the different steps required depending on what that search is like and how to complete the application. There have been a few changes made to the application process over the years to try to make it more user-friendly. So there may be some additional steps that you encounter as a candidate as you move through a process, rather than asking for all of that up front. And so there are, again, different steps that are taken. Agencies will have different processes, but you'll see kind of an opportunity to move through that process as it goes. There are some things in there to note about things like required documents. Sometimes they require a transcript, for example. You may have to complete a questionnaire. There's certain forms, Department of Defense has some forms that they require. It's really important to note what's required for that position. They oftentimes will kick folks out if you haven't met all of the requirements and are not in compliance with that application. So it's worth going through and double checking that you have all of the different sorts of documents provided that they request, and you can usually upload those through your USA Jobs account. And it'll kind of connect with your resume. You can, for me, for example, I have uploaded all my transcripts, and they're kind of in my account. So if I were to apply for a federal position, I can just slap the, kind of copy those into the application, and I don't have to do that multiple times. It's already ready to go. So those are kind of a few of the ways in which you can go through to apply and submit. Want to cover kind of what happens next once you hit the submit button, and what you can expect going that way. Leah, if you can advance the slide. You will hear from the agency. There should be a couple things to acknowledge that your application has been received. If you have advanced to the next stage, or if you have not advanced to the next stage, you should be notified. There is kind of a built-in process that should work as far as the notification piece, and that was a change made several years ago to really try to make sure that applicants were getting information as far as kind of where they were in progressing through the process. Sometimes there is, it's like, it's been a while. If you have applied for something that's a really time-bound position and it's been a couple weeks since that's closed and you haven't received any notification, it's okay to follow up. On the job announcement, there is there's always a contact person listed. And so it's worth kind of noting that person's name, making sure you have their contact information. If something were to happen, you can reach out to that person to ask any questions. It used to be that went away once the job announcement was taken down. I think now it can still follow in your USA Jobs account, but just for good measure, it's worth noting who that contact person is. Sometimes it's somebody specific to the agency. Sometimes they may be working through a third party, but there's always somebody there that is worth reaching out to. And then there are kind of background and security clearance processes that we can go through. I'm going to cover the security clearance process in a moment, but you'll note in the application process, there's probably reference to that. And you may get some additional forms that you're asked to complete after you've applied, and they kind of move through a certain process. They may require some additional information as you go. Some agencies require that at the beginning, so it's worth checking again the required documents to make sure you have everything that you need. A couple of things just with regard to overall advice as you move through the process. It's worth kind of looking or planning as soon as possible. Chip away at your master federal resume. It's okay to start that even now, even if you're not planning to look for a job for a little bit. It's always easier to add a little bit more later than to try to cram in that whole process in a night to try to make a deadline. So start your USA Jobs account now if you haven't already, and building that resume out. There's usually some questions about when agencies post jobs. So like if I want to get hired in the summer, after graduation, when should I start looking? It really does depend on the agency. Some recruit in the fall for positions that they're expecting to open in the summer. Sometimes, they post a little bit later. There's all kinds of things around the appropriation process or when certain positions are cleared to be recruited for. So it's just kind of one of those things you want to be mindful of. If you go into USA Jobs, you can actually, in your account, you can create a search. So you don't have to search USA Jobs every day. You can say, I'm interested in, this series code and, these locations or these agencies. You can kind of customize the search, and you can say, send me jobs on a daily basis, send me jobs on a weekly or monthly basis. And it will kind of give you a digest of what jobs meet your criteria that are available on any particular day or any particular time. So I find that really helpful. It means you don't have to check USA Jobs every day, but you know that you can be getting some information, and as certain jobs post, you can apply. Each agency will have its own process, so it's worth researching that. Usually there's a lot of information available on an agency's website. Sometimes positions are posted on the website that aren't on USA Jobs, but for the most part, everything is required to be on USA Jobs. So it's worth just kind of noting what that particular agency has and how they use that. We're going to go over some resources in the next segment around the job search too, but just so you know, there is a help center on USA Jobs and a glossary of different terms. If some of you have been trying to keep track of ones I've been using and it's a little overwhelming, there's a glossary available for you and some additional information on the gogovernment.org website to help you navigate the process. Also want to spend some time on the clearance process, security clearances, so you have those as well. Again, different jobs are going to require different levels of security. It's worth it to start, gathering the relevant data now. You can actually go online and look up an SF-85 or an SF-86 form to start kind of filling that out now to have your, start filling that out. Sometimes they ask for different places you've lived. I know for me, when I was looking at jobs, my mom thankfully had written down different places that I'd lived in college and grad school. And so she had those kind of already, she had those in one place. It had been a couple years since I was like, where did I live when I was in Burlington? Like I kind of vaguely remember the street name. You want to go make sure you have time to fill out those forms and have the information or track information down if you need to. So again, worth it to start that now. For security clearances, you want to be mindful of your habits, stay out of debt or diligently work to repay it. Be mindful about the different types of things that might get you into trouble in a security clearance and start changing those behaviors now. We do get asked the question, things like, hey, if I have done something that's perhaps a little bit problematic, should I try to hide that in my as I go through the process? It's much better to be honest. Some agencies have different kind of tolerance for certain types of behaviors. So it's much better to be honest and have them make the decision on your candidacy. If there's something that's been questionable, it may not be a flag for that particular agency. It may be, but if you lie and they catch you lying through your security clearance, it's a much bigger problem. So better to be honest with whatever your background is, and then move through the process as you may, rather than get kicked out because you've not been honest in what you've provided. So that is a whirlwind of kind of covering that process. I'm going to turn it over to Leia, who's going to talk about the resources, and then we've got some time for questions for you all.
Great, thank you, Amiko. So as she mentioned, I'm just going to cover really briefly some resources that you can look to after this presentation to help you in your search. So the first is gogovernment.org. So you can see a screenshot here in the bottom right corner. So this is a website run by the Partnership for Public Service that just has all the information that you need to begin your federal career search. So a lot of the same information that was included in this presentation lives on this website. As I mentioned, there's career guides, so you can search by your specific major or field of study. There's also this tab that says, who are you? So you can say if you are a veteran, or if you are just a general student, etc. So you can see different hiring paths that apply to you. Highly recommend checking this out. There's also more resources on federal resumes, and then what happens after your application process, so security clearances and background checks. The next resource I'll mention is bestplacestowork.org. So this is the rankings of best places to work in the federal government. This can be really beneficial if you're not sure which agency would be a good fit for you. You can see where different agencies kind of rank on different measures that are important to a job search. So you can see employee engagement and different things like that on best places to work. We mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but agency websites and social media. So if you know you want to work for a specific agency, or you just want to do some more background research on the types of positions that are available, the mission of the agency, etc., their websites are a great place to start. And then also following their social media. They'll often post internships or jobs that are available, so you can look directly there. USA Jobs Help Center. So if you go to usajobs.gov, there is a help center that you can find. So if you just scroll to the bottom of the page, usually it's linked there in that little help section, it'll say Help Center. This is really useful because they lay out kind of all the things that you might need to know. So they have a frequently asked questions section. They have a glossary that explains different terms. I saw, for example, in the chat, someone asking what non-competitive service means. You can find all of that in their glossary where they explain terms that are usually specific to government. They also have a section where you can look at occupations by college major. So if you aren't sure how your degree can fit in the federal government, you can look at different job series codes that apply to your major. A lot of other stuff, they can break out different hiring paths for you. Just definitely recommend checking out the Help Center. And then finally, outreach at opm.gov. So OPM, or the Office of Personnel Management, is kind of the central federal agency for all things federal hiring. They put out guidance to other agencies on how best to hire, what laws are in place to bring on new candidates. And so they have created an email that's specifically for students or job seekers. It's outreach at opm.gov to explain different things if you're confused or lost and don't know where to start. So those are just some general resources. We will, I think Peter put this in the chat, but we will share these slides and make them available so you can have direct links to some of these, but definitely recommend checking out these resources. So now we will open up the floor to questions.
Yes, hi, my name is Grace. I'm from Anita B, and I will be reading the questions from the Q&A. So the first question we have here is from Brandon. I'm a veteran with solid academic and professional credentials, but I can't get past USA Jobs. Are there other hiring paths for a person in my situation? Is there any way around the USA Jobs mess?
That's a really good question. I can maybe start by answering this. Amiko, feel free to jump in at any point. So yes, there is ways around USA Jobs if you don't want to go through that process. We mentioned some third-party internship programs or other things like fellowships. With the Cybersecurity College Initiative, that's just one example. It's a full-time employment, not necessarily an internship that you don't have to go through USA Jobs. So there are ways to get around using USA Jobs, mostly through those third-party entities. That being said, I think USA Jobs is still kind of the central way to find jobs. It's definitely the most common way, and there's a lot of positions, even internship positions, that will require you to go through USA Jobs at some point, which is why we like to kind of give out helpful tips and things for navigating that website. So yes, there's opportunities where you don't have to go through USA Jobs, but they're a little bit more limited.
Thank you. So the next question says, hello, I spent 20 years as a K-12 classroom teacher before attending law school and already hold an MA. I hope to work for the federal government after graduation. Does the federal government value candidates with considerable work experience / education in other fields? Does everyone start at step one regardless of what they bring to the job?
Go ahead, Amiko.
Thank you for that question. The experience is taken into account. So again, as you look at your federal resume, it's worth it to highlight all of that experience so that they can use that to consider grade and step moving forward. So you don't have to start at step one. There will be some things around relevant experience and things that may apply, but it's worth it to note your other experience as well, as that may factor in.
Thank you. Amiko, I see you're typing this next question, but I'm gonna read it out loud. Can Pathways internships be completed in a semester, and are they available at higher GS grades? I've seen a lot of grades 4 through 6. I'm a first-year graduate student.
That's a really good question. So to answer the first part of the question about if they can be completed, did you say in a semester? So for Pathways internship program, the requirement to be eligible for conversion is 640 hours. Doing the math in my head, which translates to 16 weeks if you're working full time. 320 of those hours can be waived by the agency if you're doing an exceptional job or different criteria, education level, etc., which translates to about 8 weeks full time. So yes, in theory, they could definitely be completed within a semester. That being said, some interns choose to do part-time, so it might take a little bit longer if they're working less than those 40 hours per week. 16 weeks is also a lot, so you might want to space it out, etc. So, but in theory, yes, they can be completed within a semester. And just to answer this, because I saw some other questions related to it, Pathways internships aren't necessarily tied to academic year semesters. They very much can be. A lot of agencies will post like summer internships, fall internships, spring internships, because that's what students are used to, but they don't necessarily have to correspond with the academic year. An agency could, in theory, post one that begins in March and goes till September if they wanted to. They're not strictly tied to academic years. And I think that is something that trips up students a lot when they see those postings. Just wanted to put that out there as well.
Awesome, thank you. I actually see a couple more Pathways questions I'm gonna quickly read as well. For Pathways program positions and other federal positions, are applicants with veteran preference given priority over other applicants that don't have veteran preference?
Yes, veterans preference applies to Pathways. So if you would have veterans preference for a normal position, you would for Pathways as well.
So, and then there's one more that's asking, are the Pathways programs and recent graduate internships open to community college students with associate's degrees or less?
Yes, yes, recent grads and internship programs both. Associate's degrees count as a qualifying educational institution. There are some requirements about which universities or which schools count, but associate's degrees do count towards those.
Awesome. Does the recent grads program apply to graduates from law school?
Yes, it does. Yes, any qualifying educational institution from, it says some college, but associates all the way to professional degrees.
Awesome. We have another person asking, are these internships and programs aimed at recent graduates who are young? I'll be in my mid-40s when I receive my JD.
Amiko, I don't know if you have more insight into this question. I think my initial reaction is that they're not necessarily aimed at students who are young. I think they're more based off career level. So it might be a Pathways intern is someone who's still in school, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bachelor's degree. It can be JD, and they're more looking at, okay, what level of school are you in, not your age. And I think the same is for recent graduates. It's a professional development opportunity, so it might seem a little elementary if you've already spent years in the workforce before acquiring that JD, but I think it's really aimed at career level. You can go open to other thoughts on that.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that there is something called the honors program, legal honors program, that may be worth looking into from a JD perspective. Different agencies will engage that program in kind of a different way. So you can, I just did a quick web search. There's the honors program at DOL. There's an honors program at HUD. So that might be something else that you may find interesting in addition to the Pathways programs listed.
We have another question. For Pathways internships on usajobs.gov, they never list a time frame for the experience, like fall semester, or summer. How do you know when the internship will start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking this. I think this is one of those things that's a little bit tough to know. the first thing I always recommend is just reading the job announcement. So they will often say when the appointment will begin. You can also just look at the announcement closing dates. Usually a job will kind of begin shortly after that. That's when they will have all their applicants, they'll go through the process and then expect someone to start shortly thereafter. So definitely recommend looking at that. If all else fails and you're just really unsure, please feel free to reach out to the contact that's listed on the job announcement. So you can ask them, when is somebody expected to begin? You can also ask, if they don't say, how long they're expected to be in that appointment. Usually if it's like a pathways internship, it's not longer than 1 year, but you can ask, are you looking for someone for the full year, or is this going to be like an academic semester program? Yeah, if all else fails, you can just reach out and ask them.
Does the Cybersecurity Talent Initiative apply to graduates from law school?
That's a really good question. Thank you for your interest in the Cybersecurity Talent Initiative first. Second, so that's a tough question. So graduate level students are considered for the program. It's not just undergrads. It can be graduate level. That being said, the most recent degree acquired should be the cybersecurity focused degree. So if you had a cybersecurity undergrad and now are just in law school getting a JD, you might not qualify because they're looking for students who are coming out with a technical degree. If you're doing like a joint JD program and maybe a master's in something that's more related to cybersecurity, then you would be considered. But really, they're looking for the most recent degree that you're graduating with to be the technical degree.
Thank you. We only have a couple more minutes left, but let's try to get through a few more. There's a clarification question here. Online, it says that the recent graduate program, the applicant must apply within 2 years of completion, but you mentioned that we can apply for a year before we graduate, right?
So you can apply before you graduate. I don't know if it's like a year before you graduate. I think that might be a little bit far. You generally don't need your degree at the time of application. It's usually at the time of appointment. That being said, the agency can kind of make their own rules about that. So one agency might say, you have to have your degree at the time that this announcement closes, whereas another agency might say you have to have your degree at the time of the appointment beginning. So as much as I kind of hate to use this answer, it really just depends on the agency. Generally, I would say it's the time of appointment.
Gotcha. So this is a general question. Are these federal positions open for international students?
Another good question, and another one that I have to say, it kind of depends. I will say a lot of federal positions are open only to US citizens, but that's not codified, set in stone by OPM. Agencies can kind of make their own rules about that, but I think the large majority of them are only open to US citizens, unfortunately.
It may be possible to work at a research lab. So as an international student, again, it's going to vary, but I know of some folks who have gone that route instead. Kind of a specific agency, but we're working for one of the research labs affiliated with the federal government.
I know you kind of went over clearance briefly, but there's a question. Would you explain how clearance affects your search and salaries?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
The question's asking about security clearance, how it basically affects your search and salaries. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add. I believe this was asked before you kind of went over security clearance.
Yeah, you can in the it's either on the front page, it's like the filter or the more filters. You can actually kind of search by the type of security clearance that's required. So there may be a way to use that to help narrow the search if you're looking for a very specific type of certain security level. The salary piece, I don't know if so much that would relate unless it's like specific to the type of job that way, but usually each position would say like, this is a top security clearance, or classified, like it would give you the specific on the security clearance level that's required for that position, and you can search by that function.
I know that we're kind of getting close to time. There are two more questions I'd want to just quickly throw out there. Leanne is asking, I often get the question of, can I negotiate my salary for a federal position? Thought is it possible given the pay scale that was presented?
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult, I think, to navigate than maybe the private sector would be. You can certainly, what you can negotiate is that step level that you're coming in. So if you have X years of experience, you might be able to negotiate a higher step. It will be a little bit more difficult to negotiate a salary just because they are tied to the GS scale. But you can certainly advocate and try to point to your work experience and say, I have X years of relevant experience and get a higher step within a grade.
Makes sense. No. The last one I wanted to point out, there was a question asking, how can students and recent grads with disabilities be given consideration for roles?
That's also a good question. So if you are on USA Jobs searching for positions, first thing that we recommend doing, as Amiko mentioned in the presentation, is kind of filtering by those things. So if you are a veteran, you're a student, recent grad, an individual with a disability, you can filter on USA Jobs to find positions that will have special hiring for you. It can be a little bit complex and in the weeds to talk about the different ways that they apply to different positions, but certainly recommend searching by those on USA Jobs. There's also opportunities on the application to list those things. You can mention it in a cover letter, and the agency will know to apply specific preferences for those things.
Awesome. There's so many more great questions, but I know that we're kind of actually at time now. Thank you so much for taking time to share all your experience and knowledge with all of the attendees. I did also pop a little link in the chat. This webinar was hosted by US of Tech, mostly through partnership with public service and also in collaboration with neededbe.org. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on in civic tech, please give us a follow, sign up for our mailing list. There's going to be many more conversations around this topic.